Welcome to the MBN Solutions Boss and Data podcast. My name is Robin Huggins. I'm Client Services Director for MBN Solutions, a UK-based data talent and people solutions business. We solve talent problems in the data space by collaborating with a community of practitioners, managers, leaders, academics and enthusiasts. In each episode of our podcast, we take a deep dive into one of the topics currently challenging the data leaders within our community, with a special guest providing their input based on their background and experience in the data space. This episode, our topic is ABCD, AI, blockchain, crypto and data. Joining me today to discuss the topic in more detail is an award-winning innovator with over 20 years experience delivering cutting-edge data and analytics projects across both the private and public sectors. At Zumo, she drives the development of the company's data strategy, responsibly managing and governing data, whilst also ensuring the value of that data is fully realised as a strategic asset. Her focus is on making data analytics accessible, transparent, secure and useful. The last couple of years have seen her specialising in incorporating data into data products in the software realm, and she is a product lead of the award-winning blockchain-based solution Oxygen that addresses the carbon footprint of blockchain networks. Prior to joining the senior team at Zumo, she headed up the data function at payments fintech Modular and has also previously led the multi-award winning advanced analytics team for the agency Merkle UK, formerly Aquila Insight. In 2019, she won the Data IQ Award for Data Analytics Leader of the Year whilst working at Merkle. She was also a member of the AI Steering Committee for the Scottish Government, which developed the country's first AI strategy, which was also the first AI strategy of all the UK governments. Welcome to the show, Vicky Byrom.
All right, Robin, thank you very much for having me on today.
You are absolutely welcome. I am delighted I am in the presence of data nobility. Thank you so much, Vicky. Mate, I have been chasing you for a long time and I'm just so happy you've joined me today. Thank you.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much. That's very sweet.
Thank you very much. Vicky, now you and I have known each other for several years now, but for the benefit of the audience, can you tell us a bit of your story? Where do you come from? What's been your journey in data? Where are you now?
Yeah, I think I was asked this the other week by someone like what how did you get into data? And it was like I had a bit of a ponder about it, and you know what, it did actually stem from primary school, and I've had a really linear kind of career with data, which makes me sound incredibly boring, but I'll try and jazz it up. So it started off like primary school. I was very lucky to have in kind of infant primary, early primary, an educator who was trying to develop different ways for children to really engage with maths, to understand a really kind of playful side of learning numbers. So it wasn't all about kind of hard logic. These numbers would all live in a little land and all the rest of it. It was a really kind of, it was an interesting way to kind of get kids engaged in a subject which sometimes turns a lot of kids off. And I think there is having that educator at such a young age has had a real impact on me. So when I was going through primary school, like me and all of my kind of classmates, we were like gobbling up maths as quick as possible. I was doing secondary school maths whilst I was still in primary school. Right. I kind of got to secondary school and kind of, you know, it was sort of really, it was like maths all the way until I got to college. I had a bit of a, do I go into psychology or college? Because psychology or maths. Right. And maths kind of won over from let's think about kind of a job in future versus a job in research. So it was maths won over in the end, and then kind of went through kind of university education. But I think at that point, you know, studying maths at uni, you really only had a number of options that were immediately obvious. And it's kind of quite funny now talking to young people, because there's still a bit of that perception of you're going to be a maths teacher, you're going to be an accountant, or you're going to be an actuary. And then that's as limited as it was, really. So kind of, I suppose, I set my sights somewhere between accountancy and actuary and thought, well, I'll just do that. And then during my time at uni, I got offered a place to go and work with the Information and Statistics Division, which is kind of part of the NHS, so like a research statistician. Yep. And so that opened up this whole world of data and analytics. And I didn't even know that this was a job. And they taught me how to code. They taught me how to apply all of the different statistical methods that I was using. I had a fantastic team. We were doing kind of record linkage at that time using probabilistic matching methods to use kind of data that's on all of the Scottish health records. It was pulling all of that together using probabilistic matching so that you could do like long-term studies on patient health. And it was like really, really interesting stuff. Got my name on a couple of papers, which was, again, as you're going through academia, that's always, the one to go and brag about, isn't it? And so that was, I suppose, my initial touch point into the world of data. So I spent a bit more time there, and then I thought, well, I should really go and check whether this accountancy thing is really, really for me, because that's what I originally set my sights on. Went off to Deloitte for a while. And I soon worked out that accountancy wasn't for me, and I jumped straight back into analytics. And I went and worked at the Royal Bank then for a number of years. They had at the time the cards, so the credit card team was set up almost like a scale up within the bank when scale ups weren't even a thing. So it was a lot of data folk who were doing a lot of really interesting stuff with data. It was using data in kind of they were almost like the granddaddies of big data, so us doing lots of different types of analytics. It was a really interesting time, so I kind of really honed my craft. And then there's sort of like the side mission of you've not finished off your accountancy, but I was like, well, maybe I'll try and find a middle ground. So I ended up doing a bit of management accountancy just to put that one on the head. But again, that was that was my second bite at it, and it still wasn't my taste. So got the qualifications and then put those ones to bed. And then I think kind of progressing in the bank at that time, there was, a bit of a route of you just went up the people management and went up the political management. And I'll share with you, Robert, that, politics isn't really my jam. I'm a lot more of like an inquisitive person. I'm kind of like helping folk, and that's more what sort of really inspires me and kind of gets me up in the morning. So I had the opportunity to go and join this kind of small data consultancy, as it was. It was like an analytical consultancy at the time. Come and join this small startup and see what that's all about. So I went across and joined Aquila. And Aquila Insight at the time, like, we went through massive growth in a really short period. We became one of the UK's like leading data science consultancies. As you mentioned at the top, I was so proud to have so many award-winning data scientists on my team who did such like exciting, amazing kind of bleeding edge sort of research coming into industry work. It was like a fantastic time, just really, really exciting. And I think that's the point for me, like my career kind of really took off. And I was doing that for a number of years. We got bought by a larger company. And again, like that integration kind of went through. And then the direction of kind of where the data and the data science they were wanting to do, I was maybe looking for another challenge at that point. I thought I'd done kind of marketing quite a lot. So there was an opportunity then to do kind of the work that I was doing, which was more in data strategy at the time. And there was an opportunity to go and work with actually one of the clients that I was working with, which was the FinTech Modular. So I went across to those guys to be their director of data, to move them more into this idea of creation of data products. So I did some stuff with setting up their kind of data infrastructure so they could allow to do that. But during that time, there's also a couple of people who I used to work with were in an organisation called Zumo, which is this crypto infrastructure organisation, who were looking for someone to come in and work with them to on their leadership team to really kind of help them use data and have the creation of data products as well. So I was modular for a relatively short amount of time, just because this opportunity came up to work with people that I'd worked with before. So that's where you find me now. So I work in Zumo, the Chief Data Analytics Officer. I shouldn't say financial. Chief Data, like Davina.
Do that as well. Yeah.
Chief Data Analytics Officer. But I'm also the product manager for our ESG product, which is called Oxygen.
Oxygen. Brilliant. And we'd spoken about ABCD with Vicky B. In simple terms, what do the technologies in AI, blockchain, crypto, and data do?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer them in a slightly different order. So I'll go DABC, which sounds like a really rubbish AC/DC tribute act.
Or the DABC.
for anyone who's listening, Robin's doing a fantastic dance to that instead. But yeah, so like data, I suppose, is the fundamental part of data of what we all do our kind of day-to-day work in. You think of that as really sort of the way of capturing a moment in a very romantic sense, of turning that into ones and zeros in some way, shape or form. Now that could be picture, it could be sentiment, it could be text, etc. But it comes down to a digital representation of a particular moment. So that's like your D part of it. And then through analytics, you start kind of putting these moments together to create stories. And these stories then start to kind of give you an idea of journeys through kind of different experiences as us as humans are having. So be that healthcare, your finances, your your activities at the weekend, etc. You driving your car, all of that sort of stuff. All of these become sort of stories. Now, if you're an organization and you're trying to address your products and services so that you're meeting these kind of customers' stories better, you can listen to them all individually, but you're not really going to get very far. So you need to kind of take it up a level, which is then, I suppose, where AI is coming in. Now, AI in its real loosest sense, because to be honest, I've heard everything from BI dashboards to like the large language models being classed as AI.
It's AI,
but
yeah.
we'll just kind of we'll run with it for my poetic definition. But it's finding the patterns within the stories that are consistent. So that's the things that organizations can start listening to then tailor their services and their offerings. So it's kind of, from that single kind of moment to that sort of full story, and then that loud roar that you can hear through from the AI, that is kind of what I think that those technologies do. So that's kind of on the data side. And then you think about, well, what is blockchain and then what is crypto? So I think kind of, in most people have an understanding of what blockchain's all about, and kind of, but maybe people don't realize why it's there. So I think kind of like thinking about blockchain is something which is like, it's a distributed ledger. So what do I mean with that? It's like, so you've got your bank account, right? So the bank is holding a ledger, basically a table, how much Robin has paid, how much has Robin spent each individual month. And it's kind of all of those different transactions are kind of written down. But that's kind of held just with the bank, right? So somehow I doubt, Robin, you're keeping all your ins and outs. You're probably just relying on what they're saying is happening with your bank account, as most of us do with like checking our banking apps. Now, what if it wasn't just the bank that held that, but it was multiple different sources that you were able to get that information from? Then the agency of like what your bank has, that hold over you, is somewhat kind of diminished a little bit, because you're able to get that information from lots of different sources. So that's kind of a distributed ledger. It's it's just several copies of the same stuff is put all around the world. Right. And the thing is that these ledgers then are really just sort of stores of like transaction information. So it's like a shared database, which is always just, you can never delete what's happened in the history. You can only ever add to it. And kind of each one of those transactions that kind of take place on the blockchain, then how do you make sure that everyone's getting the same information all at the same time? And what's kind of stopping, me saying, well, actually, Robin owes me £5,000, so I'm just going to put that through on my ledger and just hope for the best. And you've got these people called validators who are going through and making sure that the actual transactions has been validated by both parties. And they've got like a time period which they're kind of putting that information together. So they take all of the previous blocks information, these new transactions, they validate them, and then they're all trying to solve this kind of encryption key to like lock all that information down so they can start opening up the new block. And when they're sort of locking that down, that's called a consensus mechanism. So, and then once that's locked, then a kind of a new token is minted. So that's like your Bitcoin has been mined at that point in time. And I suppose like Bitcoin is an example of a cryptocurrency. But there are several different blockchains around which are used for different things. There are several different cryptocurrencies around. And there are several different uses for the blockchain which aren't necessarily just cryptocurrency. Because of this distributed ledger, it can be applied to lots of different things.
Whoa, okay. Meaty stuff to get into. Right. So, how has your career progressed from A to D or from D to A? Has that been linear, or have there been moments in the past where these different technologies have maybe caught your attention, but they've maybe passed? And how is that? How is it intersected with your career?
Yeah, so I've started off, I suppose, like the like very data heavy, data munging, which is a lovely word. I always love that. But there was an awful lot of that's happened in anyone's kind of early data careers. And then artificial intelligence wasn't a thing at that point. It was statistics, so there was a lot of stats that I was doing at that point in time. And I think kind of when I was at Aquila and we were doing all of the data science thing, again, that's all of the more of the algorithmic stuff, which was of interest up to a point, and then it was actually understanding and working with different organizations to go, well, actually, what's going on with the underlying data? Because while you have these algorithms that can do really exciting and interesting things, if you're filling them with crap at the bottom, it's going
Right.
to be coming out as
Yeah,
crap at the
yeah,
top. So
yeah.
then my kind of career is then shifted back then down to data, and there's a lot more interest that I have now about that kind of the lower level of like how data is collected, how it's governed, how it's managed. That's the
Right.
thing which I'm a slight nerd about now, because I understand you can't build these sort of more like you can't build it on shaky foundations, so you've really got to get that kind of that core, that bedrock core of your data sorted first. So I think kind of I've gone from like D to A to D, and then where it's then intercepted then with the blockchain technology is this idea of the data products. So I now am looking after a data product which is using information about crypto and its carbon footprint, but I'm also using the blockchain technology to serve something back so people can make very verifiable ESG claims. But I can go into a little bit more detail about kind of the actual ins and outs of that,
Yeah.
I think, a little bit later.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, I suppose for the next question, what I'd like to do is just focus in on the benefits. So if we think about organizational, societal, economic, or technological benefits, and all
Yeah.
the hype that's out there, what benefits does utilization of, say, one or any of these technologies actually bring? What's the
Yeah.
point?
So I think, especially within, so that AI's had a bit of a funny one recently. Kind
Mm,
of the idea of people, do we like it? Do we embrace it? Are we scared of it? Should we hide from it? And I think both sides of it should really, they're both very very valid. So I think kind of there's an opportunity for us to really utilize a lot of AI in kind of healthcare. It could be that we are using AI to really optimize kind of different processes, etc. So we can kind of see the benefits of using it. I think kind of the bit about kind of being scared for the future is this idea that we are now generating a lot of our content from AI, and we're allowing systems that have AI to make decisions on our behalf. I think
yeah.
that's a little bit which is kind of maybe slightly definitely one to watch, and kind of if you have ever had the pleasure, I love listening to his lectures, because it's sometimes I start worrying about sort of Skynet, but he definitely kind of talks me off the ledge, because it's actually probably more the human element rather than the Skynet. But if you ever go and listen to Yuval Noah Harari, and he's that at what point when the machines start consuming how these AI machines are kind of created, is that they're taking all of basically human history, and they're consuming it, and then they kind of replicate that out in some way, shape or form. But now they're pushing stuff out which is inverted commas theirs.
Yeah.
When they start consuming that then as part of like the next evolution of this, like what will happen then? And we've seen a lot of time, especially with particular AI systems, they do stuff which we don't anticipate. So
Uh-huh.
you can kind of see that. I remember there was one a fantastic reinforcement learning example of hide and seek. So there was like a little red guy and a little blue guy, and they had like this game where they're playing hide and seek. So it's kind of the seekers had a time delay, and then the hiders had an opportunity to go and hide like in this sort of simulated room, and they had like a couple of things that they were able to kind of use as props, basically, to hide behind. But as this kind of reinforcement engine was going on and on, they started using it in a way that the programmers weren't expecting. So there was kind of like some slight glitches. So rather than use these props to hide behind, they were using them as ramps to get like out of the actual kind of the
Right. Yeah.
ring, essentially,
Yeah.
that they were
Yeah.
meant to be operating in, and working in weird ways. And I think that's
Okay.
probably the sort of like the slight concern that I maybe have with this like AI, because it does become a little bit black box, that there's actually very few people who really have a good understanding of its limitations. If it's adopted more widely and then it's relied on and then things go wrong, then it's kind of what happens then. I think we saw that, like, the financial crisis,
Yeah.
that was all on the credit derivatives, and it was like, a couple of people, and it was a correlation mistake essentially, that was used, and people didn't realize that, and then that caused a financial crash. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
that's really really simple stuff people didn't get, and it had a massive impact. If we kind of think about AI systems getting put into maybe like new financial systems that we have no way of understanding, like, how will we know what the future is? So I think kind of it's going to be an interesting one to watch, and one that, I'm quite glad that I'm more in the sidelines rather than the regulation side, because I think that's still going to be a pretty difficult place to operate in.
Um, I have a supplementary question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And just taking a little look at, you spoke about your career in the NHS, and obviously at the moment, with the well publicised challenges around resourcing and optimization and some of the challenges facing an aging population, do you think that there might be a scenario where AI technology could not quite come to the rescue, but could look at things like the scheduling of doctors' workloads or the scheduling of waiting lists? Or is there possibly an answer out there that might benefit us from a societal perspective from AI's utilisation within the health service?
Oh, massively, massively. I was working with an organisation that actually does just that. They understand the resource constraints of like theatre and
Right.
operating rooms within hospitals. And they were looking to optimize that, because it's been based on we'll get so many done a day. Well,
Mm.
actually, that's based on kind of quite a generic number, and it could be to do with like conditions, or kind of previous conditions, complications. It could be done to, like, even maybe surgeons' performance in the
Uh-huh.
past, maybe where they've studied at university. Potentially you could start using all of this type of data to optimize those specific processes. So I think kind of AI in healthcare is probably got like the biggest opportunity. However, it's one of those things of if it gets put somewhere, it kind of goes everywhere. So I think it's one of those ones that you still have to have a little bit of guidance and some form of regulation around it.
I noticed last week there was, I think it was Tony Blair and the other fella, and I can't remember who the other fella was, were calling from some kind of opening of the NHS data, which would then fund this kind of thing. And I thought, I can't remember who the other fella was, but if Tony Blair and the other fella are telling me it's raining outside, then I'm going to put my shorts on. You know what I mean? I just wouldn't trust a word they said.
Well,
Political comment.
I think AI is got it's definitely going to help. It's going to help with us addressing kind of like climate issues as well. I think
Yeah,
we are needing to get a better understanding of that kind of cause and effect and our direct impact. And I don't think at the moment we can say it's all generic and it's someone else's responsibility, versus
mm.
if you're actually able to use AI models that is kind of saying, well, actually, you turning your heating up another 2 degrees, this is going to have this type of
Yeah,
impact. I think
yeah.
that's probably going to be a lot further for us to kind of close our eyes at that point, rather than to embrace it.
Okay. Um, you would have to have been living in a cave for the last 20 years or so not to have heard of all or any of A, B, C, and D. But sometimes separating the truth surrounding them from the hype is quite difficult.
Yeah.
From your career professional perspective, what's the real lie of the land and capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses? And maybe choose one, two, or however many you want of those different technologies.
Yeah, I think crypto's probably got the one that has the most hype around it,
Right.
and I think kind of there's a lot of us that work within the crypto industry, which we're sort of waiting now for it to become a bit boring. For the pure and simple reason, it's actually fantastic technology. And while we've got a lot of this hype, or kind of some bad players that are happening, it sort of detracts from what's actually a really good piece of technology, and how it can actually be deployed really well. I think kind of like some of the hype around it, especially like crypto, was the idea that crypto is purely for like drug dealers and criminal gangs. For crypto is one of the most traceable forms of kind of currency, stop, full, like, period, that's it. So it's kind of like, whilst there's a slight pseudo anonymization at the tail end points, you can follow transactions all the way through, and the police kind of use this all the time. Erica Stanford, fantastic, she went, I think, with one of the police teams on the dark web, looking for hitmen who were wanting to get paid in Bitcoin for knocking people off, and it's just, well, then you just trace where the Bitcoin went, and then you like knock on the door and, hello, we would just like to have a conversation. Is this you? Exactly. So I think that thing of crypto not being like something that's real, I think kind of related to that as well. He's like, well, it's not anything. It's not linked to gold. Well, yeah, guys, but neither is the pound in your back pocket. Your fiat money, the currency that you use now, is essentially backed by your government's promise to pay up.
Yes, promise to pay the bearer on demand. It says it on the
exactly. There isn't under the Westminster, there isn't a big pile of gold, which is the exact amount of money that's in circulation.
It's in circulation, yeah.
And who kind of controls the value of that essentially is our kind of politicians and our governments. So it's really, maybe at maximum a few hundred, maybe 1,000 people are, maybe influenced on what the value of that is at a point in time. But they're the ones who are, they can do quantitative easing, and then that will kind of, wipe thousands off any kind of our foreign exchange. So it's kind of that idea that crypto isn't valid, I think, again, is something which is a little bit of a myth that's out there. And really kind of, once you get past that kind of crypto hype, then you actually realize that it's not necessarily, that's not necessarily anything to be worried about. Scams is another one. Crypto, it's just a Ponzi scheme, and it's just full of scammers. So just watch out. And I think this sort of comes from, it's still a relatively new technology. So it's only been around for the last 10 years or so. And where there's money to be made, well, sadly, there's always people who are going to flock to it and will part fools from their money. Is that's just what happens. A lot of very kind of the decent players in this field always kind of bang on of do your own research. You really can't be waiting for the next influencer to tell you that this is the next coin that you should be investing in. You have to, if you want to do this, you have to spend a bit of time and effort understanding what it's all about, rather than being caught up with any of the scams that are out there. And some of the hacks that have happened as well, which I think sometimes people are a little bit kind of worried about as well, is this idea that sometimes they have happened because whilst it's a decentralized network, some of the organizations try to centralize them. So it's this idea of custody versus non-custody, and there's maybe been some hacks within that which have meant people have not been able to access their money because actually it's this organization that's holding like the whole pot, but they're allocating that out to that pot, and a hack has happened within that as well. So that kind of stuff kind of happens. Corruption happens everywhere, so it's just one of those things.
And you mentioned the infancy of the industry as a whole. And in amongst all that hype, you've acknowledged there are some bad actors, and FTX is the one that has been perhaps the latest and the most high-profile example. Is this to do with infancy? Is this something that we'll just have to get used to, do you think? Because at the moment it's a little bit Wild West, but it will get less lawless over time as it progresses through a maturity curve? Yeah,
so most definitely. Zumo, so a little bit of background on what Zumo is. So Zumo, we are like a crypto infrastructure organization. So we provide the software so that banks and fintechs can essentially plug crypto in as part of their offering to extend their offering to their customer base. We also we've created our own bit kit that does that, but to prove it out, we've also got like a B2C offering. So we've also got our own customers that use that kit, just so we can say, it does actually work. So we've got 65,000 users that have used, our kit there. Zumo has always had this regulation first approach. So maybe not like banks or EMIs who have to get specific sign off from the FCA. crypto firms could go on to a particular register, and going through that, it's an assessment process, etc. But you didn't have to do that up to a point. Zumo always kind of said, no, we want to be on that. So I think there's only around 30 odd firms that are on this register within the UK. But the regulation is starting to pick up now. So earlier this year, there was the financial promotions regulation that came in from the FCA. Who basically said, well, if you're not on the register and you're not actually doing this appropriate activity, then you'll need to kind of prove X, Y, Z. Okay. So you kind of see that the FCA is starting to get a lot more regulation into this space. Now, that's just within the UK. In Europe, there is the markets in crypto assets. So the MiCA regulation, that's coming in now. So again, that's all to do with like the disclosures around crypto. And that isn't just for crypto miners, that's for anyone who's got anything to do with crypto. So that could be big investment houses that have bought a lot of crypto, or it could be exchanges where you can go and buy and sell crypto on them. So that's happening within Europe. And then obviously like in the US as well, we've seen recently the SEC, they've kind of allowed finally through a number of ETFs. So these are kind of market instruments that investors are using, so kind of like trading funds essentially, and they have now allowed kind of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin ones to be listed on the exchange, which is the first time that they've done that kind of ever. So that why these ETFs might be useful is kind of maybe people don't want to get a crypto wallet, or they don't want to go and buy crypto and store crypto themselves, but they might want to invest in a fund in a kind of a standard way that they would invest in anything else. And they could then basically give the management of the fund over to the fund manager, and then they can just, kind of get the profits off the top of it should that happen. And these kind of things are all sort of slowly coming into play now, which kind of that sort of more regulated space, I think, will mean that we'll have a lot less of people sort of maybe being dazzled by the technology, or dazzled by kind of these young upstarts who do business in a different way, and then people didn't necessarily do the appropriate due diligence on them, because these guys were smart, and they totally are. The technology is pretty difficult to get your head around, but however, that doesn't necessarily kind of detract from really good governance with a business, which is maybe that what they didn't do their due diligence on at that point in time.
Okay. Switching to another aspect of this blockchain and cryptocurrency world, and one thing that people are aware of is the amount of energy commonly required for operation. It's a layperson like myself has heard these kind of equations. It's like it takes the power of a small country to power X, Y, Z. Whether it's hype, myth, reality, I don't know. But in a time where energy consumption is under scrutiny more than it ever has been, do you anticipate that technological advancements might lead to a reduction in the amount of energy required for blockchain and cryptocurrency?
Yeah. So I think we first of all need to kind of draw a distinction. I think kind of the whole for that particular cryptocurrency, usually that one's Bitcoin that people refer to, and there are different blockchains, and there are different ways where these validators are all making sure that it's the right transactions and solving these puzzles. There are different ways for them to do that. So there are proof of work, consensus mechanisms that like the likes of Bitcoin. Now they're pretty intensive. The puzzles that they're solving get increasingly more difficult each time, and more kind of, so that kind of more and more people are getting involved trying to solve them, which is taking more and more compute. Will Bitcoin kind of change that any point in time? Probably not likely. Never say never in crypto, but it's probably not likely that proof of work consensus mechanism is going to stay as is. But the other blockchains, so the likes of Ethereum. So Ethereum it used to be proof of work, but then they went into what was known as proof of stake. So rather than everybody all trying to solve a puzzle at a particular point in time, it's like it's almost given to kind of one set of validators, and the amount of energy that's required to do proof of stake versus proof of work actually dropped their energy consumption by almost 90% odd. So it's kind of So not all blockchains are equal, and then
Okay.
you've got the likes of Ripple, which isn't necessarily a consensus mechanism, but Ripple, tiny carbon footprint as well. So I think a lot of the newer blockchains, they all kind of have that idea of, yeah, we can't necessarily be doing all of that electricity consumption. But then we as an organisation, so one of the things that really kind of drew me to Zumo was that it was very vocal in its sort of sustainability agenda. And again, I'd heard this, well, Bitcoin, same kind of energy consumption as a small nation. So how are we addressing that, guys? What's the elephant in the room? And we've got a fantastic sustainability director who works in Zumo, and she was sort of pioneering this idea of like, well, how do you really get an idea of like what are you responsible for under the greenhouse gas protocol, under the different scopes? So you've got sort of the different scopes relating to your different activities. So be that kind of the electricity you actually buy in to power your organisation, or like the emissions that you're kind of getting rid of with your particular activities. There's different scopes, so there's different ways of kind of doing this measurement. And when it comes to something like crypto, that gets recorded under something called scope 3, which is almost like it's your supply chain side of things. And a lot of organizations really struggle with this scope 3 of trying to work out their supply chain and what their impact is, because they have to work with loads of different vendors and they have to do loads of different things. I remember Kirstine showing me something which was around Unilever. Now, Unilever's they're pretty forward thinking with how much information that they share around their scope 3 emissions. But even that, it was like them trying to guess at how much the electricity for the fridges where their ice cream is in each individual supermarket, and the transportation to that, right? That's part of their scope 3, which is pretty tricky. With crypto, it's like it's the Bitcoin network, so it's electricity. So in the main, there's a little bit of kind of like the hardware and the computers and stuff, but it is really electricity. And the thing is, we know how to decarbonize electricity through renewables. So we've got an opportunity as a sector to really be pushing that renewables agenda. Now, a lot of the Bitcoin miners, they're doing some really interesting stuff, like, working with maybe like they've got big, next to big solar plants, etc. It could be that they're actually using, I think there's they use kind of methane flaring, where that's kind of, would just be getting used. They're using that to generate the electricity for their mining. So, there are some really interesting stuff that's happening actually at the Bitcoin mining level. But then kind of up at our level, we were like, well, we're still responsible for a share. So what are we going to do about that? And there is a market instrument which is known as a renewable energy certificate, which can be unbundled from the actual electricity that's supplied. And that can be purchased, which is sort of promoting this use of renewables. Now, why do these things exist? Especially like in somewhere like the UK, you will have particular targets that you have to have the amount of renewables that go into the energy grids. But there'll be other grids, say like Indonesia, maybe in Thailand, where they don't necessarily have these targets, but there's an awful lot of renewables that are getting created. So it's an opportunity for these type of producers to use these market instruments, which is kind of giving them a bit of a boost into the renewables market, but they can trade them around the world. So we were looking into seeing whether we can use these renewable energy certificates then to mitigate against our particular share. And we could, the guidance isn't 100% there, but it was pretty indicative that we could do this. And then we were wanting to make sure that when we were buying these renewable energy certificates, we were using something which maybe, it's like it can't get traded twice. And a lot of these ESG assets, one of the issues that's kind of happened, you will have heard of carbon credits. I think everyone has heard of carbon credits at some point in time. But some of these large registries that were kind of issuing these carbon credits certificates, they were found, to have kind of quite big gaps in the knowledge of what these projects were actually about. Or there was cases where these carbon credits, because essentially they're just PDF documents that get sent around, they were being sold multiple times over. So we were like, well, we know a bit of technology that does all this, which is the blockchain.
Yeah.
And we worked with then a provider who was actually going, well, yeah, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to put these renewable energy certificates actually on the blockchain, makes them really easy to trade. Then you can't double count them. It's full transparency. So we have now incorporated that into our offerings. So we're able to go to these large investment houses now to say, look, you might have some Bitcoin on your book. We can tell you exactly how much your carbon footprint should be, because we work with some fantastic data providers in this space who do brilliant data models on the electricity, what they think the electricity consumption is on each one of those networks. And then you're able to purchase these renewable energy certificates and match that to your activity. And then we put that information on chain as well. So then when you go out to your stakeholder base, rather than kind of greenwashing, yeah, we do some really great stuff, it's like, well, there it is. It's on the ledger. You can go and check it and see whether that's what it is that we're actually doing, which is a really exciting space. And that's the product Oxygen that I look after.
Amazing. Brilliant answer. Like, amazing. Coming back to some of that innovation and cool stuff, and from my own limited perspective of knowledge, I actually placed an engineer into a business as a gaming company. And what they were doing, and I think you and I have discussed this in the past, I am still at my advanced years an avid gamer. And one of the things that I'll do in games is that I'll get my little character, and you get little outfits and different little things. But normally you'll either pay real money for those little different outfits, or there'll be some kind of token system in the game. But this games company were putting distributed ledger technology at the heart of games, which I just thought, wow, mind blowing. And doing different bits of interesting work is kind of what I'm all about. What really interesting uses of, and I think right across the spectrum from AI to blockchain to crypto to data, what other really interesting stuff are you aware of, or are you working on that you can tell us about? What's cool? What's going on out there?
So blockchain is one where I think, because I'm still new at this as well. So not being a blockchain native, and I'm only sort of about 15 months in. So it's kind of every day's a learning day for me, which again I absolutely adore. I think the use of blockchain for these smart contracts. So like blockchain now is being kind of put into anywhere you can have a contract, which is taking all of these sort of like middlemen and brokers kind of out of it, which is, I think that's a really interesting use of this technology, really. So that could be anything from like real estate, it could be anything from like supply chain management. So you now have this all within the blockchain. It's all, the ledger has been kind of updated for each one of those individual journeys, and it's not held by kind of the individual players. Kind of you think about supply chain management, you're requiring DPD are doing their thing, and DPD with maybe like the tracking system with the the big ferries that go around the world, the big tankers, and then the local distributor that actually got it from the factory, and all of these, there's like a huge amount of reliance that everyone's kind of doing their own thing well, and it's only when it falls over that there's a bit of an issue. Whereas if you've got that all on the blockchain, that every single one of those transactions has happened, one, you've got a way now of actually using data and AI to start doing kind of the automating and that kind of process optimization, because the data is now there and it's in a single source, and you can tie all of this kind of data story together, which is fantastic. So I think kind of the supply chain management side is just really exciting. But yeah, in the world of gaming, I think that's all of the tokens that are happening in that, like from loyalty tokens, etc. There was an organization that we were working with recently, and they were using the blockchain to issue kind of tokens, wildlife tokens, so that you could invest in a particular area that was doing work in conservation. So you're actually paying people directly, not through any sort of intermediaries or any governments or any charities. You were actually kind of giving those individuals like access to these tokens, which they were able to spend. And then the benefit of that was that you were able to say, well, this token is actually worth 3 elephants in that particular region. Which was really kind of cool. So.
Oh, brilliant. Vicky, we're close to the end. It's the last couple of questions, and the last couple of questions always do a little bit of future gazing and a little bit of retrospective. Data and blockchain clearly have a symbiotic relationship. Where do you see it taking us next as an industry or as a society? What's down the path?
I think we've touched a little bit on like the AI fears and the AI opportunity. So I see like that's going to keep on being kind of the top of a number of people's agendas. Definitely, the world of regulation is going to hit in both, and I think we can, in some ways, put the genie back into the bottle a little bit with some of this stuff, without kind of fully stifling the creativity. So I think that's going to sort of like cover us from the AI side. I think from the blockchain side, this isn't going to go away. There's an awful lot of governments that are looking now at crypto in some form to replace, what our normal currency, even like the Bank of England. So the CBDC, you've got that being referred to as the Britcoin.
Britcoin.
Bitcoin, which sounds awful. They've got to think of something better than that. But the digital pound, essentially,
Right.
having these tethered assets, that's going to be more commonplace, I think. So I would see that the use of blockchain technology is going to continually increase, and I think kind of AI is going to be all around us as well. And I think it's just one of those things that we have to make sure that we don't become too dumb of a nation. I think to put it all into the minds of the technology, and we keep a little bit of it to ourselves.
That's that would always be a fear. I think that we need to stay, as a society, we need to stay aware, and we need to stay educated, and we need to stay curious, because
I think so.
there's no point.
And staying, like with the idea of like embracing regulation. I think kind of there's always a lot of fear of regulation, that it kind of stifles creativity. But I think kind of having really like the best regulators who are in this space, who know it inside out. That's exactly what we want. So we need to make sure that we're paying these people as the good salaries to have them gamekeepers rather than the poachers.
We always conclude each episode with a trip on the Wayback Machine, Vicky. So if you could talk to Vicky from, say, 10 years ago, based on what you've now learned about particularly the B, the C, the D, if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
I would say like go get some Bitcoin, because it's probably worth a few quid now. So
You could have
but
told
no,
me that as well, mate. You could have said that to me.
I think knowing me though, Robin, I would have ended up like that poor lad in Wales who's gone and put it onto his cold storage, and then he went and took it to the tip, and he's not been able to go back and find it, and he's lost about 150 million quid's worth of Bitcoin. I think that probably would have been me.
Yeah.
So I think that joking aside, I think for me, it's more about kind of understanding where you work best. So it's a bit more of a personal journey, maybe more rather than the technology. I think so. 10 years ago, I was just about to literally start. I think I'd done about 3 days' work at Aquila at this time. And I was concerned about that because I was moving from like a very large organization that had, a lot of stability, had a lot of opportunity as well for me to work there. And I think moving from that to this sort of startup and scale up world has been kind of the making of me. So I think kind of I would probably have a lot more faith in my decision for doing that. You find your tribe. I love working in organizations that are small enough where you've still got the solo mission of this is what we are trying to do before the infighting for resources becomes just sort of day to day. I think that's the thing. I'd probably have a lot more faith in what I've done. I would say stay curious. I've loved this journey. I think I've always had just sufficient enough knowledge to be kind of dangerous, but not enough knowledge to just be kind of completely geeked out and entirely just in one sector. So I've always had kind of that nose around for other things as well. So always look for the innovation, always follow a good tribe, and don't look back. Go and join the scale ups. It's a fantastic ride.
Wow, what a note to end it on. Vicky, we have collaborated on many occasions, and I've got to say this has probably been the most I've enjoyed listening to you talk. Thank you so much. I'm buzzing, man. I'm buzzing. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Robin. It's been a really good chat. Thank you very much for having me on.
So thanks for sharing your passion, your knowledge and your expertise on the theme of AI, blockchain, cryptocurrency and data. I hope you, dear listener, have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. And if you have, please take a moment to review the show on your podcast or video platform of choice, giving us 5 stars, obviously, and share this episode with anyone you feel would benefit from a view or a listen. Thank you. Please do look out for the other episodes in this podcast series where I'm joined by other special guests discussing topics relevant to today's bosses and data. Visit www.mbnsolutions.com for resources like our UK Data Salary Survey, to watch recordings of our latest data meetup events, or to download our white papers, research and thought leadership. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter for the latest news, views, opinions and, of course, hottest opportunities in the data space. Goodbye.